Touchdown, Chargers!
Well, what's up, guys? Welcome into a brand new episode of Chargers Weekly. We are 1 week away from Chargers training camp. As always, joined by the voice of the Chargers, Matt Buddy Smith. And Buddy, a pair of special guests to get us ready for camp.
Yeah, camp 1 week from today. I saw all of the dates that were posted on the 7th of July, already gone, sold out. So make sure you keep checking Chargers.com for those training camp tickets. And I guess we'll just get started. Thuc, why don't you start, as you don't have an opportunity to join us very often because Chris doesn't invite you because he's a jerk.
It's my fault.
That's right, it is. Just kind of your thoughts on the first thing that just comes to mind when you hear training camp, July 17th, where your eyes are going to go and what you're looking at.
My first thought is, oh my gosh, I don't have any summer left, first of all. I wish I would have enjoyed my summer vacation more. Second thought is, I believe everyone is really excited to see what this rookie class can do. I think Jim Harbaugh said earlier this offseason that this is the hardest working, most focused rookie class he's ever been around in his experience of football. So I'm excited to see if they can kind of live up to that billing. Aranda Gadsden was one of the rookies who really popped later in minicamp. So we'll see what he can do and when the pads come on and they start playing some, or at least getting ready to play some real football.
You know, Popper, we were talking about this last week, just all the storylines entering training camp. If you had to pinpoint the top storyline entering camp, the number one thing we're going to be talking about next week, what would it be?
I'm going to cheat a little bit and go with sort of a broad storyline. I'm really looking forward to watching all of the competition because it feels like there's probably three position groups that are going to be very, very hotly contested in terms of making the roster, the 53 men, and also in terms of starting spots. You know, corner, I think, is going to be highly, highly competitive. You know, obviously you have Tarheeb Still and Cam Hart returning, two veterans they signed in free agency, and Dante Jackson and Benjamin St. Juste. You talk about the interior defensive line, which feels like a very deep group to me. But I think the question is who's going to be that top end producer that emerges from that group. And then receiver, you know, Thuc just mentioned the rookies, two of those rookies, Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith. In that room, you have Mike Williams, you have Quentin Johnston, who is going to be battling for playing time, potentially a roster spot, who are the guys that sort of emerge around Ladd McConkey. So, and there's even more position groups that you can point to, but it just feels like with the way they built this roster, it's deep and there's going to be a lot of competition. And I'm really curious to see sort of who emerges in these position groups to be that sort of blue chip top end guy that they can rely on.
Yeah, Chris, I think like this time of year we get, and Popper can attest to this, we get focused on the 53 and we get focused on, you know, those last five players when really, you know, it's just, it's I don't know, it comes with the job and the time of year, but really it's about who's going to play, like who's going to snatch these spots. And like, that's what's more interesting than spots 48 through 53. Is it going to be Tarheeb and Cam Hart? And is Derwin going to be the big nickel? Is, like you said, Popper, and I think you alluded to it, Thuc, like, is Quentin going to be receiver, I'd say 3? Like, if Mike Williams is healthy, is he receiver 3? Is he receiver 2? Like, what? That's sort of the more interesting part of training camp to me, as opposed to us trying to figure out if Ja Taylor and Dean Leonard are going to make this team. Are they going to carry an extra safety? What about all their draft picks? Like, there is, I think to your point, Daniel, like there is serious competition for these starting positions. It's a deep team. I love that it's a deep team. It feels there's way more depth than there has been in the past. But I don't know what this starting lineup's going to look like when they take their first snap in Brazil on the 5th of September.
Yeah. You know, and guys, one of the position groups I think that the fans have talked about a lot, and we've talked about certainly a lot this offseason, is interior offensive line and just what that starting five is going to look like. I guess maybe from like a 10,000-foot view, Thuc, and then Popper, just your initial thoughts on what they did this offseason across the offensive line and how you think that may look throughout the course of training camp, Thuc.
First of all, I think it's interesting to point that it seems very fitting that a Jim Harbaugh team would have like the number one topic being offensive line. It seems very appropriate for kind of like the ethos of this team, of what this group is trying to build in terms of their identity. So yeah, we saw them flip-flop back and forth with Zion Johnson starting at center, Bradley Bozeman left guard. Then the next day they switched. And that's kind of the big thing that we're all going to be looking for in terms of that starting offensive line, because Rashawn Slater is set at left tackle. Mekhi Becton was that literal big free agent signing, and they're going to put him in at right guard immediately. And then Joe Alt is coming off a really strong rookie year at right tackle. And when you just speaking to that right side specifically, when you put Mekhi Becton and Joe Alt next to each other, it's like two comically large humans standing next to each other.
That's a great phrase.
And
that's great.
As like a small person myself, like it's almost frightening to stand next to those people.
Yeah, let the record show I did not bring up the interior of the offensive line first.
This time.
No, we're forcing you to speak on it.
I just lobbed you up.
I want to acknowledge before you go further, Popper, just because I don't want you to think I'm taking your content, but it's great content at The Athletic. And I love that you pointed out, like, hey, calm down. You know how this front office works. They're going to get a look at it. And if they decide it's not right, then that's when they go shopping. And that's kind of how Joe Ortiz did it last year. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, they went into training camp thinking that they were probably going to have to bring in a third safety last year. But they had AJ Finley, who had shown some flashes, and they let him play a bunch during training camp to see if he could be that guy that could play next to Alohi Gilman when they moved Derwin James around. And they came to the conclusion that, like, hey, we need to be a little bit better here. And they identified Elijah Molden as a guy who could potentially be available. I think it's going to be a similar process this year. And they believe that Zion has a shot to be a good center. Like, they truly believe that. I think a lot of it is unknown because he's never played there. And they're really going back to the reps he had in the Senior Bowl, in the pre-draft process when he was playing there and showed some signs of life as a potential center. So in terms of the approach, like, the guard market went crazy in free agency. So I don't think it was, ridiculous for them to sort of look for value. Will Fries signs for over $80 million. Money and we talked about the Aaron Banks contract before. I was fine with how they sort of approached free agency. I personally, based on how that Houston game went and the weakness that was the interior of the offensive line last season, would have probably invested more. But the way everything shook out in terms of their board in the draft, they ended up going more with pass catching weapons to try and improve offensively. And they're going to try and figure it out at left guard and center. I think that, like, in a perfect world, what they would like is for Zion to move to center and be very comfortable there. And then they slide Bradley Bozeman at left guard, and they feel like that will be an improvement. I have to see it. That's sort of where I'm at. I have to see them with the pads on. I have to see how they perform. Yeah. It feels a little bit like, they're trying to flip these guys around. They think there's going to be significant improvement, but I have to see it before I really believe that, they're going to have dramatic improvement. I think the big question is, and we can get everyone's thoughts on this, like the Mekhi Becton signing, like, they feel like inserting him in and having him play is going to drastically improve the interior because you have a much better player there as sort of a force multiplier. And I can certainly see that logic. But again, like, where I'm at is, like, let's see him with the pads on. Let's see what it looks like. And then we can sort of get a sense of, like, is this going to be a dramatic improvement or an incremental improvement or no improvement?
And I think when people talk O-line, they just inherently visualize pass protection and sack prevention. And for this team, it has been a fight with one hand tied behind your back in the run game for the last half decade. So the idea that, like, it's even when it was Trey and Alt last year, we're like, why can they not run right? What is going on? Like, the idea that now you have, like you talked about, Tukney, like these people movers, these massive humans to be able to run the ball that side, to be able to run the ball behind Slater, who's exceptional in that phase of the game, like, that just opens up a ton. If Mekhi Becton isn't an elite pass protector, if they can just unlock that on that side, and we know Zion's a good run blocker, he's fine. If he goes back to left guard and with Rashawn, if there's just some way for them to at least get that going, like, I just want to see what this team looks like with a legitimate run game where play action is working and Herbert's got time to throw because play action is working, because you have to honor it when the guy's taking a play action fake and running to the right side instead of them saying, whatever. And just to kind of back on that real quick, because I like hearing myself talk. Like, remember, guards, like Trey Smith's going to get paid $24 million as a guy that was taken in the 6th round. You know, Kenyon Green and Zion Johnson are struggling as first round pick. You could find guards, you know.
But you have to draft them money.
You do, but I think that's kind of like what you were alluding to, like the way their board fell. It's unfortunate that they didn't take that shot. Now, they got one in the 6th round. Okay, I've talked to some people about Branson Taylor. I know nothing about him. I didn't even bother watching any film. I had no idea. But there are people inside that building that are very excited about the strength that he possesses and what they believe he could look like as a guard. So I think, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Trey Smith. I'm saying it was a flyer on a tackle that was injured, but he profiled as a guard to some people that I really trust what they think, and they think he's got a shot. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not putting my neck out there as dying on Branson Taylor Hill. I'm saying like that's what I was told.
Yeah, I guess like just one more point.
I was going to say,
go ahead, Chris. Go. Yeah, sorry.
No, I was just going to reference something that you had in your notebook about the wide receivers. And listen, if we had like a blame pie of like what happened in Houston, obviously, you know, the offensive line struggled, but, you know, the running game, I think, averaged less than 3 yards per carry. And I think that goes hand in hand with the offensive line. But you mentioned getting these weapons on the outside for Justin, but now this completely revamped running game with Najee Harris and Omarion Hampton. You wonder how much that is going to contribute to success offensively. You know, J.K. was hurt at the end of the year. Gus just, for whatever reason, didn't have it last year, and he was hurt at the beginning of the year. So I look at this kind of revamped running game as such an integral part of what they want to do this year, and I wonder if that elevates the play of the offensive line to the play of the running backs behind them.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, there's 2 ways to go about it. Like, I think everyone would agree that the interior offensive line was a weakness last year. There's, you know, one way is to drastically improve your personnel. But if the market doesn't shake out in a way where you can drastically improve your personnel via the draft and free agency, then you have to pivot to some other way to improve. And the other way to improve is to drastically improve the personnel around those players to try and get more out of them and take some of the weight off their shoulders. And I think they leaned more towards the second route because of how everything shook out. And so you get a bunch of more weapons who can win against man coverage and help in some of those third down situations where Justin Herbert wasn't very good last year when he faced man, you know, on third down. They get better at running back. Like, they did obviously bring Mekhi Becton in. We'll see if he can improve the running game. And so, like, I think that's sort of the approach, right? Like, you build everything around, you know, you try a swap with Bradley Bozeman and Zion Johnson, and you see if a better running game, more options in the passing game can alleviate some of the issues you had on the offensive line last year. And I understand the process, and I think there's certainly logic to believing that if you can build a better running game, then you can take some of that pressure off of your offensive line.
And it's not like they didn't do anything or like they didn't make any moves toward building the roster. Because the other thing that everyone was shouting about was like, make sure you get more playmakers for Justin Herbert, and they definitely did that. They addressed that in the draft, bringing in, like Popper mentioned, KLS, Keandre Lambert Smith, Trey Harris, Aranda Gadsden, who really flashed during minicamp. So I think there's just a lot of changes, and I'm excited to see what they can do in training camp when they put the pads on and they really start preparing in earnest and see what this team will actually look like. Because like you said, Pop, like, you got to show it, right? You got to show it, especially in the offensive line. There's not really much you can kind of discern from these, you know, practices without pads and no one's trying to get hurt at this time. So I think there's still a lot to see in terms of what they can do, especially on offense with all these changes.
Yeah, 100%. And then, like, you go to that Houston game and, like, obviously the protection was an issue, but they also had nobody else outside of Ladd McConkey. So you could absolutely say, like, you look at what happened last year, look at what happened in the playoffs and be like, you know, yes, the protection was an issue, but our biggest weakness was actually that we had one guy that could actually make plays. Like, you go to the rest of the receivers in that game, it was 2 catches for 14 yards. And so, like, I understand it. Just like from my experience covering football, like, I'm always going to try and build my offensive line. Like, that's going to be my approach. And, you know, Tukney brought up the ethos of the team. Like, if you want to be a big, bruising, mauling, physical line of scrimmage team, then it takes investment. And that's sort of my approach on it.
And we saw that succeed last year with the Eagles. Like that was their calling card. And then they got one of those guys.
Beat the hell out of everybody. The one mistake that, and I know, I'm as guilty of it as anyone, is, you kind of forget that other pieces can improve other parts of the team. Like the idea that they're running, and I'm not trying to take shots at these guys, but it's just not what they do. You're having Tucker Fisk run routes. You've got Eric Tomlinson out there. Hayden Hurst was never right from the jump. And, Will Dissly is now forced into catching 50 balls on 80 targets. And you just bring in Tyler Conklin. Like, I don't think people recognize what a huge upgrade that is. A guy that can run routes and catch balls and is a viable red zone target. That Omarion Hampton, a back that has juice, a physical punishing back with legit juice to take it 75 to the house every time he touches it. Like that, all of that is part of the, can we solve, and you mentioned it earlier, is that part of this? Like it's not just a one answer riddle. There's a million different ways to answer it. And I think when you kind of take it in totality, it appears as though they addressed it a heck of a lot better than just, why didn't we sign Will Fries? Why didn't we draft a center in the second round? It's kind of like, well, all of these pieces combined. Now, whether or not it works, I can't say, but I do think there were other ways, like you alluded to with the pass catchers, Popper, that they're trying to figure it out.
And, let's not forget that the first pick of the Ortiz-Harbaugh era was Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors and some of those other talented receivers at the top of the draft. So I think that these guys are just they're picking the best football player for the team. And at that point, when Omarion Hampton was on the board at 22, I think a lot of us thought that maybe Omarion Hampton would have gone a little bit earlier to Dallas, perhaps, or based on where Genty went at 6. So I do agree with the playmaking aspect of this, bringing in all these different receivers. And that's what's fascinating. I know that was also in your mailbag, Popper, and I'd love for you to chime in too on this, just the pecking order of wide receiver, and then tie it into that with Conklin and Gadsden to go with the year that Dissly had. Like, how do you see this wide receiver room shaking out? Let's say 1 to 4, because, Quentin's certainly in the mix, but depending on how quickly Trey Harris gets up to speed, this could be his job for the taking as well.
Yeah, it's really, obviously Ladd first. That's an easy one to put in there. I think when we talked to Sanjay Lal, he said that Quentin Johnston is a starter, and we're treating him as a starter. We told him he's a starter, and that's really one of the big things that I'm looking for, is like, if they're giving this to him, if they're setting this example, then can he hold on to it? Because I think that's a big part of this team, is like, you want to empower him, but also you need to push him. So I'm really curious to see what Trey Harris can do. I think he started flashing in rookie minicamp, and in minicamp, Keandre Lambert-Smith was hurt toward the end, as was Mike Williams. So I think there's a lot of changes that will be happening, and there's going to be a lot of shuffling in that wide receiver order. I don't know what you think, Pop.
Yeah, I expect Quentin to be wide receiver 4 at the start of the season. Like, I think you're going to have Trey Harris and Mike
September,
Williams.
like when September hits, week 1.
Yeah, you can look at what they say, or you can look at what they do. I always prefer to look at what they do. And so they went out this offseason and brought in 3 receivers who play primarily on the outside, which is where Quentin plays for the Chargers. And that tells me that they wanted significantly more competition at minimum at the position. And so, I think Quentin's going to have to earn it. I think he's going to have to earn his spot on the roster. I think he's going to have to earn his playing time. And that's just what the culture is, right? Like, I wrote this in the mailbag that, those who produced will stay. Like, Jim said that in the little video that they put out last July, and it was hanging in the locker room all season. Like, you have to show up, you have to play well to earn your spot on the team. I think last year you had a situation where they just didn't have any other options. This year they've created a scenario where they have many other options, and you're going to have a ton of competition as far as who's going to be playing alongside Ladd McConkey, and they've created a scenario where Quentin's going to have to earn it. And I'm excited to see it. Like, if he has all of the talent in the world. If he shows up and plays well, there's a path for him to play a lot for this team, but he's going to have to show up, and he's going to have to play well. And we'll see that and figure that out in training camp.
Yeah.
And we saw Trey Hayre start moving up a little bit, because at the beginning of their sessions together, it was Ladd, Quentin, and Jalen Rager at the first three receivers. And then toward the end, we saw Trey Harris move into Jalen's spot. So we're already seeing Trey Harris progress. And Quentin could be the next guy that he's going to run down.
Yeah, this is where we get into the whole 53 conversation, right? Because and it's a sore spot for Popper because of the extra receiver that
not
was
a sore spot.
Last
New year, baby. New year, baby.
Yes, that we went through this last year. There's no way they'll keep the extra receiver in Brendan Rice, and he ended up sticking. And now you look, and it's a similar conversation, right? And those, and again, we always get caught up on there's always a preseason receiver that flashes in that flashes, and we're like, there's no way they can put him on the practice squad.
Michael Bandy effect.
It's like, they can put him on the practice squad, and no one's going to scoop him up. It's fine. And I think they still have Jalen Johnston. There's right. Is that who it is? It's Jalen Johnston, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who had a great preseason last year, and we're like, someone's going to scoop him up. Nobody ever did. He was on the practice squad the whole season. And I think if they chose to take that path with Brendan Rice, I don't think anybody's taking him off the practice squad. I think if they put Jalen Rager there's nobody taking him off the practice squad. So that's what makes it, to me, it's not money plays. It's not draft status. It is going to be a full-fledged open competition where, you were taken in the first round, but second rounders are expected to do big things in this league, and Trey Harris is going to be expected to produce immediately. So his draft status might as well be on equal footing as Q's. I don't think there's any, Ladd did it as a second rounder, and he's in the NFL top 100 players. And I think at 100, he's still ranked too low. So you can do it. So I think that's why, to your point, Tickney, that's why you're going to see Trey Harris start to get those reps as wide receiver 3, wide receiver 2, and then you can bet your tail that in that Hall of Fame game and in the preseason, you're going to see Q out there for sure, and you're going to see Trey Harris out there for sure, and that is going to be a full-on competition. And that room is, I'm going to say it again, I know it got you last year, Daniel, but they're not keeping 7 guys at receiver. They're just not. I can't envision it happening.
Well, it ended up being more of a procedural thing, because then DJ went on IR 5 days later. So, but I will not be listening to you guys on 53-man rosters. When I do my annual pre-game radio show appearance, I'm going to plug my ears for all of the questions and just spew takes. I'm not even going to listen to you guys.
The biggest wild card in all of this for this year specifically is Mike Williams, because we just have not seen a healthy Mike Williams in a couple of years. He got hurt early in that Minnesota game. His last game was a Charger, and then just last year was a mess for him, going to Pittsburgh, Jets to Pittsburgh, and just not really being able to get into a rhythm with either quarterback. So now he's back home, comfy confines with the quarterback he loves and respects. And how good is Mike going to be out of the gate, and can he perform like the Mike Williams that we saw exactly 2 years ago as a member of the Chargers? Took me.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. We didn't get to see a lot of him during the offseason because he was still kind of working back. I wasn't covering the Chargers when he was last here, so I have not watched him play in person yet. So I'm excited. I want to know what it's like. I know I love him at the podium. That one day we talked to him, I remember I walked out and I asked Pop, I was like, is he like that all the time? So I really hope that he returns to the level that not only the team hopes, but also what I think he hopes for himself. He said last year was, quote, terrible. He called himself terrible. So I appreciate and respect that kind of self-awareness. And I think he wants to reassert himself in this league as well. Hopefully he's completely healthy for it.
So let me add one thing on Mike. In order to make plays in training camp, the quarterback has to throw you the football. And Justin Herbert, one of his favorite targets, maybe his favorite target he's ever played with, Mike Williams. Crunch time, where was he looking? 81. So that is part of the calculus here, that when Mike is on the field, Justin is going to be looking his way because that trust factor is already built in. And you look down the rest of the receiver depth chart, like who has that level of trust with Justin already? Ladd is in that conversation. But outside of that, that trust factor isn't really there. You know, you have two rookies that they're building. Quentin, you know, I don't know if he's ever going to be at that level with Justin, just based on how things have gone. So like, you know, if Mike is healthy and playing in training camp, like I have an expectation that he's going to be making a lot of plays because Justin just trusts him, has always trusted him. And, you know, Justin doesn't say a lot at the podium, but the one thing he did say during minicamp is like Mike Williams changes the way you play football. Like that should tell you everything you need to know about how Justin feels about Mike Williams. And so I agree with you, Chris. Like maybe a guy that people aren't talking about as much, but I feel like he's going to be impactful just because of that rapport that's there. And like when things are breaking down late in the down, you know, there aren't a lot of guys that Justin trusts to throw the ball up to. That's one guy that he absolutely trusts just to give him a shot.
Well, buddy, think about this. The guy in New York didn't trust him. He trusted Garrett Wilson and his guy Devontae Adams. His first game as a Steeler, Russell Wilson threw it up and he made one of his Mike Williams signature touchdown catches. I think his only as a Steeler. So I think he still has it in him, and having that chemistry with Justin, I think is going to pay dividends for him.
You mispronounced Garrett Wilson. It's Alan Lazard. We've talked a lot of
Randall Cobb.
We've talked a lot of offense, but when you look at this murderer's row of quarterbacks and offenses and play callers, and you know, it's because look, it's Mike Williams, it's Justin Herbert, it's a first-round draft pick, it's big Mekhi Becton, like you talked about, Thuc, and just seeing that. I don't want to call it a novelty, but it is kind of. You're like, this just doesn't make any sense as I'm staring at it on the right side of the line. Like, I think we're forgetting that this team was really carried by Jesse Minter and that defense last year. And when you look at the lineup of quarterbacks and teams they went against compared to what it's going to look like this year, I know it sounds crazy, but I trust the guy implicitly. I believe that much in Jesse Minter as a play caller on that side of the ball. And if he says, we're really excited to have Dante Jackson and we love the traits of Ben St. Juste, and, you know, we replaced Poona Ford with these three guys instead of one, I believe it's going to work. And I don't know if I'm crazy for believing that's just placing too much trust into a guy that just did it for 1 year against that schedule, or if we saw enough that, no, you should. Because what this guy did last year and putting every single player in the exact position where they were able to thrive and play their best football is just what this particular coordinator and this group of coaches is able to do. Like, and I'm hopeful because I really like them. And I know you're not supposed to, you know, get emotionally, not emotionally attached, but there's just guys you like and guys you don't. And I really like Jesse Minter, and I want to see it work out again because it's insane that guy didn't get a single interview for a head coaching job in the NFL, let alone in college football. Yeah,
I mean, I think Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh would just like to keep him their own secret as long as they can. So maybe Jesse Minter doesn't want to be talked about. Maybe they don't want us to talk about him. We should just keep it on offense anyway, so they can just keep him to themselves. But yeah, I'm really interested to see what Jesse Minter can do with this defense that led the league in points allowed per game in their first year. How can you improve on being the best defense already, you know? And one of the interesting things that stood out to me was Mike Elston said that even though we lost 2 starters on the defensive line with Poona Ford and Morgan Fox, he thinks that they're better on the defensive line because they added Naquan Jones, they added Deshaun Hand, and they also drafted Jamari Caldwell. And I think something that we talked about initially when we first watched Jamari's film with Joe Ortiz and we saw him on draft day, it was like, this guy is giving Poona. Like his film, his skill set, it's giving Poona. So that's a really exciting and potentially, you know, easy thing to look for in terms, like you've shown success with this type of player. You found a new one. Let's just keep it rolling.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating group. You know, I think we talked about earlier, and Money sort of mentioned it. Like it's a really deep group. I think like more than anything, I look at some of these positions and I'm like, who is going to be the guy? Now they might not like necessarily need it. Like they might just go with the committee approach at a bunch of these positions all season long, and that might work. But I think like last year was probably an ideal scenario, right? Where they went into it thinking they were going to go by committee, and they had some of these guys really emerge, whether that was obviously Poona Ford on the interior. Christian Fulton played really well over the first half of the season before he had that hamstring injury. But, I think I'm with you, Money. Like, I just think the guy's a really good coach. I think the staff is freaking excellent. And I think they are just going to be able to get more out of less. And that's a blessing and a curse, which we've talked about, throughout this offseason. Like, because they're such a good staff, the front office might think maybe they don't need as much, and maybe we should invest more in the offense, which wasn't able to do more with less. And so it becomes a curse a little bit because Jesse Minter had to sit and wait until the third round to get a draft pick, and then they go back to back with Kyle Kennard in the fourth round too. I think there's enough there. I think the question is, with the schedule being much tougher, are they going to be that type of defense, where they're top 10, or is it going to be more middle of the pack? I don't see them being a bad defense ever. Like, I think just if you give them enough pieces and enough depth, they're going to be able to put it together. And you do have enough, star power to be that type of middle of the pack defense. You still have Khalil Mack, you still have Derwin James. But I'm going to be fascinated to see, like, is it going to be like last year where they're able to get some of these guys to become, those blue chip type players? Does Dante Jackson have 7 picks? Jamari Caldwell, Deshaun Hand, one of those guys, they emerge and have that type of production on the interior? Or are they going to have to take a different approach this year and really lean into that depth and play a bunch of guys and be more of a by committee type defense? That's really what I'm looking at.
I mean, I go back to Michigan when Minter was there. One year you have Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson as the go-to guys. The next year you have guys like Chris Jenkins and Mason Graham on the interior that kind of carry the day for him. So Jesse's been so good at just kind of playing to the personnel that he has and just going to the edge group. Obviously, no more Joey Bosa. We know Thule's going to step into that role, and we know who Khalil Mack is, obviously. Do you guys think that there's enough behind those two, or is it something where a veteran, we named some older guys that are still on the open market that maybe could fill a need on third down or, kind of supplement some snaps from an edge perspective? Do you think they need somebody else at edge, or do you think they're good where they're at?
I mean, I think it's a wait and see, right? I was really surprised at how thick Kennard was. That was one of the first things that jumped out at me when the rookies hit the field. And look, it's a guy that led the league and led his conference in sacks and the most competitive conference in football. So you certainly got a base there that they can work with. I think we're all, I think going into last year, we all expected Thule to take a huge step just based on what he did and how many, just sack creation. It wasn't, he didn't get the sacks, but the sacks he created, we were like, okay, now that, he's kind of more of a guy, it's going to happen. And so I think I still expect that. I still, suspect that he's got that in him. We saw it at SC, and we saw it his rookie season. So the Khalil Mack part of it's an interesting question, because why would we, it's the Tom Brady effect, right? Like, why are we doubting this potential Hall of Famer that's proven that age is just a number when it comes to him and his work ethic and how, but I do think we've seen a little, that athleticism drop off a little bit in the last couple of years from Khalil. So it's an interesting question because there are guys out there, right? I think Za'Darius still out there. Von Miller's still out there. Is there a Bud Dupree-like player that you'd be able to get, an older veteran that's coming in as his pass specialist? And does that make sense for one of the 53 spots in what we talked about is a pretty deep team?
Yeah, I think they're fine. I would be surprised if they went and brought in another veteran, because it felt like all off season, it was like, they got to get younger here. They got to get younger here. They got to bring in a player who, if Khalil Mack is done after this season, can, be sort of an ascending, promising player to give them sort of an exit plan post Khalil. It's not the group it was last year. Even though Bosa was playing through the injury, like, it felt like the edge group was the engine of the defense and they built everything around that group. I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case this year, but I think, at the end of the day, like, it revolves around Thule, as Money alluded to. Like, I think he has the capacity to be an elite edge player. And I think you have to also bring in, okay, he played the second most special team snaps of anyone on the roster last year. How much was that affecting his play on defense? If he's not in that role this year and can focus exclusively on defense, what happens to the production, not just sacks, but obviously, pressures as well. And also just, down to down play. So I think the group is fine. I loved Kyle Kennard coming out. So I thought it was a really good pick in the 4th round. I see a ton of upside, as Money alluded to, like he's got the length and the size, and you put him in a room with Khalil Mack and you feel like you're going to be able to harness some of that power that he showed off in college. So I don't know if it's necessarily like going to be the engine of the team like it was last year, but I feel like it's a solid group. I would probably look elsewhere in terms of like, okay, these are the positions they might look to improve in late August.
Yeah, I feel like they're so excited about Thule, and I'm interested to see what Thule can do when this is his spot. I feel like even though Joey was hurt for a really long time and he didn't play a lot, it still felt like Thule was the backup who was elevated. Whereas now this is his spot. He's empowered to be a starter. Jim Harbaugh named him as one of his elite 9, now 10 hard
Josh
workers
Harris,
of
baby.
the team.
Yeah.
Shout out to Josh Harris. So Thule is empowered and supported to have a starring role. And I'm really interested to see how he'll respond when those kind of expectations, not necessarily expectations in a bad way, but just like you're allowed to take up more space. You're allowed to produce more in this way. Like the spot is open for him. And I think, as you know, we've seen him as a local guy. He grew up here in Southern California, went to college here. We've seen him for a long time always produce in every spot that he's been given.
Yeah, no question. Guys, is there any other position battles that we didn't talk about that you think fans should maybe have their eyes on the first few days of camp?
Well, I don't know if I'd call it a battle, but I'm certainly interested to see how it looks with a healthy non-appendectomy Junior Colson out there with Deion Henley, because that, you talked about the engine of the defense, like that could be the engine of this defense. If Colson's who we think he is, and I believe Deion's going to be in the conversation as the best off-ball linebacker in the league in short order, like that's the one I'm looking at on that side of the ball.
Yeah, that was the one I was going to bring up.
Sorry, Daniel. I jumped
No,
in.
it's a great point. I go back to like there's certain moments in training camp that just stick in your mind. You know, one that's always stuck in my mind is like Rashawn Slater's first rep in one-on-one pass pro against Joey Bosa when he was coming out in 2021. You just like, okay, that guy's going to be good, right? Like I think you just have those moments. I remember last year in training camp, I was standing next to Money. It was like Junior's first time back in team drills, and they were doing a 9-on-7 run drill, and he just explodes through the line of scrimmage, blows up a screen pass, and we look at each other, and it's just like you have that moment like, yeah, he's going to be good. So I think like, you know, there's a lot of parallels between Deion and Junior. You know, Deion as a rookie had that hamstring injury in the preseason, never really was able to find his footing, get snaps on defense. It kind of just derailed his rookie season. And it was very similar with Junior, you know, between the appendectomy, he gets back on the field, he has an ankle injury, he goes on IR, and never really found his footing. Deion in year 2 emerges, has a breakout season. I could see a very similar path for Junior, but he's, again, like you go down the list, it's like, okay, this guy should start, but they've got other options, right? Like I think they love what Denzel brings if he can stay healthy, you know, as a run defender and his violence and physicality. And Troy Dye played some really good ball on defense, right? So it's like he's got to be in the mix based on how he played last year, and you saw the contract he signed. So obviously they value him. So it's going to be a fun competition there. I think like, you know, Navarro Bowman sort of said it during the offseason where he was like, we have a plan as far as what we want to happen. I think, you know, the indication there is that like they want Deion and Junior next to each other. But like everywhere else, he's going to have to earn it. It's going to be fascinating to watch.
I totally agree. I'm really excited to see Junior see what he can do in his second season. The other thing I would be interested in is, again, I don't know if this is a competition, and we briefly mentioned him, but I want to see what Tarheeb Still can do in his second year. He had a really breakout rookie season. I think they thought of him mostly as kind of a nickel guy, and we watched him during the offseason line up a lot at the outside. I know versatility is a big part of what that secondary does. So I'm interested to see if he can become one of those outside corner guys, or if that was just kind of an experiment they're going to try. Who knows? And then what Tarheeb Still's progression means for Cam Hart. I think Cam, both of them 5th round picks. I think Cam got slowed down a little bit with some injuries, and he also was out most of the offseason with that shoulder injury, and what he's going to be able to do when they get back. So what those two fifth rounders now in their second year can kind of progress into for the Chargers on that defense.
I'll name one guy from that class too, and it would just, you look at Joe Ortiz, what he did with Alt and Ladd in the first 2 rounds. If Junior pops away, that I think a lot of us expect him to in year 2. You mentioned the 2 fifth-round corners. What about that 4th-round defensive tackle that they keep saying put on 30 pounds of muscle and has been in the weight room and maybe can make that leap from year 1 to year 2, and Justin Aboigbe? I mean, if he can be a key part of that rotation, just look at that draft class that Joe put together last year with all of those guys contributing. That could be something. And then, Money, we always know that there's going to be rookies that pop at some point. So, Gatson seems to be the one that got a lot of buzz this offseason, and just adding him to that tight ends room seems to be a good thing for Justin Herbert and company.
I'll just finish with that, and a button on it is that remember, that goes both ways. Like, look, draft picks are great, but they had 8 this year, 10 last year. That's a lot of young guys. So the idea that they're all going to hit and somehow it's a failure if they all don't, that's a lot of young dudes. So when Cornelius Johnson and Brendan Rice and these 7, if it's Triquez Bridges and Mickens, if for some reason those guys are on the practice squad and they need to be developed, it's perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal. Not every 4th rounder is going to come in and be Max Crosby from the jump. There are Justin Aboigbes out there that just need time, and you got to develop them, and you hope that they're able to take that next step. So would you like all of your draft picks to be great and stick with the team? Absolutely. But as we saw last year, it's just not necessarily the way that it always works out.
Yeah. And it's a spectrum too, right? A 4th-round pick hitting doesn't mean that guy becomes an all-pro. If that guy can carve out a role in any capacity on the roster, then that can still be categorized as a hit on the pick. So I think that's what you're looking for some of these later round draft picks. Can they come in and be an impact special teams player? Can they give you 15 snaps a game on the interior as a defensive lineman? Those are still value adds to the team. And I think that gets lost a little bit, that there is a spectrum. There's nuance to, hitting, so to speak, on draft picks.
I think something that I was thinking about earlier is, I was talking to Rashawn about something in the locker room, and he said people forget that the NFL, people are still allowed to develop in the NFL. You don't just show up and you're who you are forever. People have long careers. If, like you said, Pop, just carve out small roles every single year, and that success is, and that helps you stick around. So just because they don't appear to be this starter immediately, we love to celebrate a rookie like Ladd or Joe Alt, and were off to great careers as well. But that doesn't mean that if you don't hit immediately and you don't become a star in your first year, that doesn't mean that you don't have potential to still stick around for a long time in this league.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly, before we get out of here, Chris, I'll just say 2 words: Dean Leonard. What a 6th, 7th round pick, one of their best special teams players. And last year, before he got hurt, we were like, ooh, that might be their outside corner. So there's still potential for Dean Leonard to make this team. And because he is that good on special teams, and you would assume Ryan Ficken's going to fight for him to keep him on the 53. And man, we thought he was tracking to be that guy, not Tarheeb Still or Cam Hart, that he was going to end up being that dude opposite Christian Fulton that was going to get out there, or with Asante Samuel, I should say, that was going to be part of that mix.
Yep. Guys, this was fun. We'll have to do this again when the 53 gets released, so Popper can either celebrate or sulk.
I have faith in you, Popper.
I will only join in celebration.
Yes,
right.
This is the year.
Tootney's the highs and lows. Tootney's gonna join us. We know that Tootney will be here. So
I mean,
gotta
this
bring
was
back
my
the
first
number
time,
game.
so I hope I can be back.
Tootney's our key to the number game. We got to bring back the number game this year, boys and gal. As a matter of fact, we have to.
Yes.
You were not here when we ran when our man Eric ran the number game, but it's time, I think, to. Were you here, Popper? You were here, right, when we were running it, or no? You're looking at me kind of quizzical.
Wait, refresh my memory.
When we each get to pull, I think we pull 3 numbers, and we pull one number. You pull one number, so 0 through 9, It's the last number of a jersey, and whichever number amasses the most points, you win the week. And we did it with all the beat writers and us in the booth, and it was a fun way to get a little extra something in the game in case it gets away from you.
There you go.
to keep yourself interested. But, it's something we got to bring back this year. It's
Absolutely.
a good way for us to get the interaction. With
So,
the,
but it's
the
pure
radio
luck,
and
though. It's pure
What's
luck.
that?
It's pure luck. There's no
Pure
ball
luck.
knowledge involved.
Yes, pure luck. But going into the game, you would be like, oh, got 8. It's a bad run D. And so like you would get those, you'd get the 0 from Austin and you'd be all jacked. And then you'd kind of think about good defense and you'd pull the kicker and you're like, ooh, kicker might be the way to go. It's pure luck. You're just pulling the number out of a hat. But, there's wild
I
things
remember
happen.
this. I think it might have been my first.
Yeah, it might have been your first season. Let's bring it back though. Let's discuss it at training camp, and that's the most important thing to come out of this podcast today. Get the number game back.
Starting in Sao Paulo, we'll make it happen.
That's right.
Appreciate you
Sao
guys
Paulo
very much.
starting Canton, Chris.
Canton.
Preseason's plenty for the
Football
number
this
game.
month.
Hey,
right.
For those who are watching this, you'll probably see it on a Friday. We are taping this on a Thursday, so exactly 3 weeks we will have preseason football in Canton, Ohio. Detroit Lions, LA Chargers, baby.
That's right.
Let's go.
So excited.
All right, guys. For Thuc, for Popper, and for Money, I'm Chris. This has been Chargers Weekly.